Welcome back. We turn now to another debate roiling Washington about the president's intervention abroad in Venezuela. Today on Capitol Hill, Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune now saying that a vote on a much-anticipated war powers resolution may not happen. The resolution to limit President Trump's use of force in Venezuela advanced last week with the help of 5 Republicans. But now, one of those lawmakers, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, says he will join Republicans in trying to kill the measure, citing assurances from the administration there are no troops on the ground and that the White House would seek congressional authorization if that position changed. Leader Thune also suggested the resolution could be dismissed as not relevant because of the administration's assurances, though a motion to dismiss the resolution would also need a vote. Joining me now is Florida Republican Congresswoman María Elvira Salazar, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for being here.
Wonderful to be here with you.
Wonderful to have you here.
Sure.
We really appreciate it. Let's start off by talking about the very latest out of Venezuela. I had the opportunity to speak with President Trump last week about this. I asked him if there could be elections in 30 days. He said, absolutely not. That's way too soon. He later in another interview said, the United States could actually be there for several years. Are you comfortable with that timeline? Is that what you were anticipating?
Listen, I'm comfortable with the fact that the Americans are in Venezuela, the fact that they took out Maduro, and the fact that María Corina Machado is going to be meeting with the president tomorrow. She is the leader of the opposition. She earned it. She proved it. And we're delighted that she's going to have that face-to-face with the president. And I am sure that she's going to explain to him what she did, which we know very well.
Well, what are you hoping will come out of that meeting? There's been a lot of talk. Will she give her Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump? What do you think could potentially move the needle? Because obviously right now Delcy Rodriguez is in power. What do you think could be?
Well, María Corina was the one who was able to, against all odds, prove to the international community that they, the opposition, had won the elections 70-30. She was able to conjure up somehow this plan all over Venezuela and bring the tallies out so everyone could count and see that they indeed had won. She had been in a tunnel for 16 months, and we have been in communication with her, not only myself, but other members of Congress, where she has been telling us how the opposition is still strong inside Venezuela. So in other words, she is the leader, and she was there until she went to Oslo to pick up the Nobel Peace Prize, which she dedicated to President Trump. I am sure that she is going to just explain it to him, and he's an intelligent guy. He's going to understand who really has the votes in Venezuela.
Do you think, so it's fascinating what you're saying, you actually think tomorrow could change the way that President Trump views who should be running Venezuela?
Well, it's the empirical evidence. The empirical evidence is overwhelming, and she will definitely demonstrate it to him. And he gets it. He gets who the leaders are, who has the votes, and she does up until today. But I do believe that the United States sponsor free and fair elections with international observers. We'll be there to make sure that those elections are clean, and she may win again.
Do you think it was a mistake for the Trump administration? They took out Maduro, but they left Delcy Rodriguez and other Maduro allies effectively in power.
I think that's a great question. Is the art of the possible? Politics is the art of the possible. For 25 years, the Chavistas destroyed the country. Delcy was part of that plan. Remember, we got to remember that Delcy was the vice president of Maduro. Maduro was indicted in 2020. He was the head of the Suns cartel, along with Delcy and Diosdado Cabello and Padrino, who's the head of the military. We're talking about that they are the same gang. But we also know that the United States needs to keep stability, which is what Secretary Rubio said. Stability, restore, and transition. We, the United States, we're not in the business of occupying. We're in the business of liberating. And that's what I think is happening.
And just to push you on that point, you have been very supportive of Secretary Rubio's plan that he laid out that you just referenced. Part of it is for American oil companies to go in and to help rebuild the infrastructure of Venezuela's oil industry. A number of the oil executives were at the White House last week. They expressed skepticism. They said, look, there have to be real security guarantees before they can go back into Venezuela. What did you make of that meeting, and what is your level of optimism as we sit here and have this conversation that that part of the plan is realistic?
Once again, the art of the possible. Those oil executives are in the private sector. They're not in charity. They need to go in and make sure that they're not going to be confiscated again, which I understand. But that's why we, the Americans, and that's why the opposition can definitely come together and say, okay, let's rebuild PDVSA, which is the oil industry, largest reserves of oil in the world. I always told Maria Corina, and I'm going to say it now publicly over the phone while she was hiding in the tunnel, once you make it back and Venezuela is a free country, make sure that the American companies are the ones who will be definitely taking over and helping you rebuild that country and that oil industry, because we do not want the Chinese buying once again 90% of the Venezuelan oil, because then China will use that power to invade Taiwan. No, we'll use that power to have dominance when it comes to AI. No, we want that to be in the hands of the Americans.
Let me ask you, because we started off the segment talking about the War Powers resolution. One key Republican in the Senate switching his vote, now no longer supporting the War Powers resolution. Do you think if there is more military action in Venezuela, significant military action, do you think the president would need to get authorization? I know you were opposed to it when it came through the House.
Yeah, but you know, we know that there will be no need for any more military action.
You're that confident?
Because, of course, because Delcy and Pedrino and Diosdado and all these people who stole the country for 25 years, I have info that they know that there is a new sheriff, and they're not going to be playing with the White House, because look what happened to Maduro. He's going to be spending the rest of his life with his wife, Celia, somewhere in an American jail. They don't want that destiny. So this is a new blueprint. This is like a new model that President Trump has created vis-a-vis Western Hemisphere, where now we will not need heavy military intervention, just those 3 minutes to take him out, and they will understand. So that's like I'm saying, Rubio is right. STR. Stabilize, SRT, recover and transition.
A couple more questions and we're almost out of time. I do have to ask you about Iran, because there's been so much focus right now with President Trump signaling he's weighing potential military action against Iran amidst these protesters. Today seemed to walk that back a little bit. But would you support military action against Iran in this moment, Congresswoman? I
will support the same type of military action that happened in Venezuela. Look at the Iran, and you know this
is complicated in Iran.
Indeed, because the Western Hemisphere cannot be compared to the Middle East. But look what's happening. The effect in Caracas was felt all the way in Tehran, where everyone wants the same thing: freedom, liberty, to be able to raise their kids. And the Iranians are claiming for the same thing. And I'm so happy the president is saying to the Ayatollahs, "Don't dare, don't dare." And, you know, I'm sure they read the memo.
Well, let me ask you finally about something domestically. Obviously, there's been a big debate over the way in which ICE has been deployed all across this country. And the backdrop to all of this is the debate over immigration.
Yes.
And the president was posting about this today. Are there any real conversations going on, Congressman? And I know you're engaged in this. Any bipartisan conversations that make you think, yes, immigration reform is possible?
Listen, I'm going to start with a lead. I'm sure that I'm sure that President Trump is going to be for immigration what Lincoln was for slavery and Reagan was for communism. He is a man that he comes from the private sector. He comes from construction and hospitality. Construction, hospitality, and agricultural are those three sectors, 15% of the economy, that need those hands. I'm not blaming ICE. I'm blaming Congress that has not been able to write a law, and for the United States Congress and the President to sign an immigration reform. And that's why I introduced this legislation called the Dignity Act, which is not citizenship, is not amnesty, is dignity. Let's give dignity to those people who've been here for more than 5 years, do not have a criminal record, have been contributing to the economy, are needed in the labor force. We need to know who our neighbors are. So let's just clean this mess and write an immigration reform. And I just wrote dignity, and I would love to be able to come back and explain it to you, because that's the Solomonic in the middle. And that's what I think will solve the problem.
Okay, well, we're going to track it closely. We will have you back. Thank you for joining us, Congresswoman Salazar.
My pleasure to always be with you.
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate your being here. Coming up next, protests grow in Minnesota 1 week after the shooting of Renee Nicole Good, as half a dozen prosecutors in the state tell the Trump administration they're quitting. What's behind those mass resignations? Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.